This is Maiku, and you are listening to the Narrow Path in the Floating Mountains podcast. This is a podcast that is dedicated to stories and tellings of my spiritual experiences and its relationship with mental health. Some of the stories I will be sharing will cover many topics such as the parallels in spirituality and mental health, ghost stories, dreams, tarot reading, mediumship, and more. Many of the stories I will be sharing are based purely on my personal experiences and how I have made sense of them throughout the years. So to those who are listening to this podcast, I hope that you will enjoy my stories and join me on the narrow path in the floating mountains. Welcome back to my podcast. I wanted to take the opportunity to use this episode to talk about Reiki. And I wanted to do that because Reiki has played an important part of my healing. And it's something that I'm learning is helping me reconnect with my cultural roots of healing too. It's interesting how just access to this type of healing modality has opened up pathways for me to divest into my cultural roots and healing, as well as spirituality in my cultural roots. And it's very similar. And right now I'm actually going through a course that I purchased about a year ago called Decolonizing Reiki. And the course was created by a Reiki practitioner, Marika Klamer. She is Japanese descent. I believe she's half Japanese. I don't know what her other half is, but she created this course to educate people on the colonizing of Reiki and also its history. And so I am finally opening it up now that I have a little bit of time, and just kind of reading through the material that she has. She's done a great amount of research into healing. She is also a healer. She uses Reiki. I really like her the information that she's providing, because not only is she of Japanese descent, where Reiki is a Japanese energetic practice, healing practice, but she is also connected to this practice very much in the same way that I'm connected to energy healing or spirituality in the way that I understand it too, which is through the lens of being Hmong. And so there's a lot to unpack with this course. Actually, I'm just getting into it, but at the very beginning, when I first learned about Reiki, I already knew that through the different institutions and centers that provide certification or classes, that I knew because they were non-Japanese people, they're mostly white, that there was some level of, well, it's very much cultural appropriation, and that was something that I struggled with Reiki when I first learned about it. And even when I went to get certified as a Reiki practitioner, I think through conversations with other healers and how they use Reiki or their perspective or their lens into like practicing Reiki, it has also provided me with insight and knowing where I place it, knowing where my role is in this like complicated or complex system of energy healing and the spiritual community, specifically with Reiki, because it has become such a commodity in the spiritual community. But I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I obviously am not the person to be educating about it, because again, it is not my cultural root, but I can try my best to give information or direct you to those sources that would be the source for you to look into when looking at Reiki. One of them being Marika Claimer. She goes by, her Instagram handle is the energetic ecologist. She has other course material, other educational material regarding healing, holistic living. I think I saw on her website she does a few courses on fermentation, so also like nutrition and things like that. But definitely check her website out if you're wanting more extensive information on Reiki and someone who is just an expert at looking at the complicated or complex history of Reiki, not just specifically with Western society or Western culture, but the history of Reiki itself. And something that I'm learning as I'm like perusing the course material is that it is a very ancient practice in Japan, and Imperial Japan adopted it, but it can be traced back to the indigenous population of the indigenous people on the island of Japan practicing it. So it has its roots in indigenous healing practices too, which I'm also very interested in learning more about. But I wanted to also include that because there's so much information about Reiki and its history that I obviously just cannot include it all into this episode, nor do I feel like I am the person to be the educator in that stance, but just wanted to provide that. Now, what I can do is give you an overall gist of what Reiki is. Reiki is actually a form of energy healing practiced in the Japanese culture. Not everyone practices it, but at one point in time, there were many practitioners, but through just historical strife, meaning war or trauma within the history of Japan, that many ended up not practicing it, many ended up hiding it, and so in modern day only a few are known, or there are a few prolific practitioners. That is also where it starts to get complicated with the history of Reiki. Western Reiki, as we know it today, I don't want to say can be attributed, but is attributed to a Reiki practitioner by the name of Mikao Usui. So when you see people have their certification connected to Usui, it's essentially the Usui lineage. So how he practiced Reiki is how the school practices Reiki. But there's different things depending on the practitioner that doesn't necessarily mean that one way of doing it is the true way. That's something that is also pretty clear for many people who are who have done the research, are open enough to understand that one lineage is just not the true lineage. I admit I have also fallen into that trap. The reason why I have the certification that I have for doing Reiki is because I had interest in wanting to practice from a school that could trace its practice back to an actual practitioner. So that was my main thing, was that I wanted it to be from an authentic source. But in hindsight, because that was hundreds of, I don't know if it was 100, but I could easily say it was probably 100 years ago that Mikao Usui was present, alive, and practicing. And so from even where that lineage has started from to now, I'm sure it's changed quite drastically. And so it might not even look like how it did when it was first discovered by whoever it was that was teaching it to the Western world. And so, again, I was one of those people who fell into that trap. But I think through learning and embracing it, but also having this complicated feeling of, am I also like adopting this Western way of practicing, and reflecting on whether how I would feel if, say, some monk practices were then westernized and completely loses its purpose or its practice. And so I had a lot of time to think about that, and I am very happy at where I have arrived, where how I make sense of it now, and through conversations with many other like non-white energy healers, that Reiki, not specifically like the practice itself, but as a form of energy healing. Energy healing is very universal. And so as I'm also reading the course material for the Decolonizing Reiki course, it's very affirming. It also means that, not one particular group or one particular person can have access to this healing source to do the healing. And in actuality, it exists in everyone. That access to it exists in everyone. And Reiki is just another way to get to it. It's another system to get to it. But essentially, Reiki is energy healing. And the term Reiki means life force. So in this way of thinking, you're accessing life force, the life force around you, the life force from above, the life force from within, to assist in healing others' energy, healing others' energetic body, others' spirit. And so when we simplify that, and I'm trying very careful not to like oversimplify it, because there is there is a reason why Reiki is so unique too. And that is something that I'm still learning about. But essentially, when you think about it, it is energy healing. And again, Reiki, the literal translation is life force. In Hindu practice, it's prana. And in Chinese, it's qi. And so when you think about it, this idea of life force exists. This term exists in all cultures. I can only speak from the Asian lens, because I do feel like that information is transferable throughout Asian cultures. However, there are still some differences within each culture and how they practice it. I am so excited to share about how it is present in my culture, but I'm going to save that for part 2 of the Reiki part 2 episode. So I hope that you can all look forward to that one when it comes out as well. But for this one, I will be talking about the first time I had a Reiki session. But now I talk about how I came across it. And how I came across it was that my sister she was the first to learn Reiki. So she got certified in Reiki So she's certified Reiki 1 and 2. So in terms of learning, you get certified in 1 and 2. And then once you have done Reiki 1 and 2, then you get a few months to get experience before you become a master. You become a master by taking another course to learn new signs, to channel Reiki, and then you get your master certification. And so I first heard about it through my sister, and after a while I was like, actually after she did it, I was like, oh, that's really cool. But I was kind of like, I don't think I'm ready. Because also I was like, I think I can do energy healing, because this was very universal. You can do it you can do it without getting the certification. But I think for me, I needed the consistency and the practice, like the rules. It also helps with intention too. So I actually resisted getting certified in Reiki. But then after a few years, because it was by this point, my sister got certified in 2018, I believe. And then she had been practicing it. And then by that time, by 2021, was when I finally got Reiki. So it was almost like it was a few years. I don't know how many years. I can't do the math right now. But it was a few years before I finally decided. And when I did, it was because the determining factor was when I got my first Reiki session. And how I came across this was that week I was feeling really, really stagnant. I was literally waiting in line to get my tires, or I think it was not tires, it was my oil changed, and the line was forever. And I was going over it with my husband. I was like, oh my God, I don't know what is wrong with me. I feel stuck. I feel like I'm on the edge and I just have to take the leap, but I don't know what to. And so I told him, I'm like, you know what? I think it's time for me to get a Reiki session done. And so I looked up a Reiki practitioner, and I wanted the Reiki session from a practitioner who was from the Usui lineage. And I don't know why. I was just like, oh, I think it was a pride and an ego thing. Like, oh, I want something that was like truer, truer to that lineage or whatever. I think too, I was desperate to be a part of like a group or be in association with this school. And so I was like, I'm going to do it. If you're not going to do it and you're not going to try it, I'm going to try it. And so I booked a session. And the session was with my teacher. And so the session was going to be in another town about 50 minutes away. And I was like, I don't care. I'm going to drive out there. I'm going to go get it done. I need this. I want to see if this is what I need. And the days before that, I kept trying to book a tarot session. I kept trying to book a mediumship session to learn it, actually. And the place that I wanted to get it done was in town, but they had just completed a class and they weren't going to offer it until like the next 3 months later. So I'm like, no, I kind of need this now because I don't know what my next step is going to be. And I was obviously going through something spiritually, like just wanting something else. And so I scheduled this Reiki session, and I was just like, maybe I just need this. Maybe I just need this. Maybe this will lead me to what I need to do next. And so, actually, I think I got this Reiki session done after I got my photo reading done. Yes, I think I did. And so I was kind of going through it. I was just like, okay, I'm gonna get this Reiki session done, and I'm gonna explain a little bit why I just thought about the photo reading, the aura photo reading. But I got it done. As soon as I booked it, while I was waiting in line to get my oil change, the line started going. I had been in this line for almost an hour. And as soon as I booked it, the line started moving. I was like, oh crap, I think I was supposed to do this. So I was really excited, but I was very anxious. And I booked it for the next day. So it would be the day after, it would be the next day. Okay. So not only that, I booked it early. I booked it like at 10 or 9. It was early. It was early. It was like 8. So I had to get up at like 7. I remember when I had to get up, it was still dark outside. So I booked it early. The next day I woke up. I was like, okay, I'm ready to go. I was like freaking out because I thought I was going to be late. But I ended up being on time. So on my way there, it was still dark. It was probably like a little bit before dawn. And I'm taking my usual route to hop on the highway to get to my Reiki session that was like 50 minutes out. As I'm going, I'm like nervous. I have no idea why I'm getting jittery. Then I kind of just like speak to spirit, and I'm like, spirit ancestors. I think I was speaking to my ancestors. I was just like, you guys, if this is what I need to do, like, show up for me. Show me a sign and show up for me. Anything. Like, show me that you're here. Show me deers. Show me that you're here as deers. You know, show up as deers. And so I'm driving and I pass this field, this meadow that I know typically see deer. So I was kind of like trying to be a smart aleck too. I was like, oh yeah, I know I'm going to be seeing deers here. Well, I passed this meadow and there are no deers there. And I'm like, okay, Michael, you're just like hyping yourself up. Let my guard down. As I'm driving, I pass by this small patch of a field. It's even smaller than this meadow that I was like anticipating to see. I go there and I see, it looked like 20 deers, but I'm pretty sure it was like 8 or 10 deers just grazing in the grass. And I've passed by this lot many, many times before and have never seen this many deers. And so I'm going, I was like, oh my god, okay, you guys are here. I get it. I meant to do this. And so I'm just like surprised, and I start driving, and I go, as I'm going, you know, I'm like really excited. I'm like, okay, this is it. Like, I'm gonna have this really bomb-ass experience. I don't know what. Maybe it's gonna be subdued. I don't want to hype myself out. So as I'm driving there, I also think to try and record a podcast. So I was trying to record a podcast while I was driving, like on the highway, 50 minutes outside of the city that I live in. And so as I was like recording, I was talking about how I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna do like an update. As I'm recording, I'm like, I can't hear anything because my windows were down. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm not supposed to film it. I'm not supposed to record this. So I get there really, really early. And I'm just kind of waiting. And I'm at least like 20 minutes early. And so I'm like, okay, I got like 20 minutes. And so I'm waiting, and then and so as we're arriving into this town, I come to this like Victorian home, and this small like Victorian like cottage looking building, and it's in this really, really tiny town. and about like 15 minutes from the highway. And I drive up to it. I'm like, okay, this is really cool. This totally looks like the Victorian home from like Charmed or Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And I'm just like, oh my god, this is so cool. I'm like, this is like a real life like witch, right? Not in a derogatory way, but in like a good way. Like, oh my god, there's so much magic going on here. And so I stop and I go, I'm waiting, and then she comes. I see like a little white cat come out, and I'm like, oh my god, she has a cat. It's so cute. And she comes out barefoot, and then I'm like waiting. I'm like, oh my god, don't make eye contact. You're gonna be awkward. So she like sees me, and she motions for me to come in. Like, it's okay. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's totally cool. I can go in. So then I go and we're going in, and I'm just kind of like, we're greeting each other. And the interesting thing is that I booked with her too, like when I was trying to vibe out, like if this is the person I should go to get a Reiki session from. The picture that I saw, like for some reason that week I was just channeling fairy energy. And so when I saw her picture on her site, I felt like she looked like a fairy queen. And so I was just like, oh my god, like, this is so cool. And then when we get there, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I'm totally vibing with this. And so we go in, and as we go in, inside it's like wooden floors. It's very Victorian on the inside. There's no furniture on the first floor. There's a banister, and then this little like opening or den area, and then in the back of the den area or the opening, there's stairs that go up. And so as I'm walking in, I get like the feeling that the room is just full of like, the energy is just full, like not residual, but like there are multiple people in there, but there's no one there, right? And so she's like greeting me. At first I was like, oh my god, is this place haunted? I'm like, you know what, if it's haunted, I'm sure like she's cleared it out. Like, there was just a lot of energy there. And I felt like I walked into a bar during the Victorian age. And I'm just like, okay, don't be spooked. This is probably just all of this energy kind of like lingering around. It's probably even her guides. And I'm just kind of like taking in the environment. And then on the banister, there's these two little dolls. These dolls that are Japanese dolls too. I think they're Japanese dolls. And they're very antique. They're definitely antique. And they're sitting on the banister. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, they're saying hi. So I'm like, okay, just acknowledging them. And then we're walking. She has me take off my shoes. And then we proceed to go upstairs, is where she does her classes and her Reiki sessions. And so as we're walking up, I see that she has merchandise. She sells crystals. She sells like teapots. She sells all different types of things. And so we're walking up, and as I follow her up, the upstairs is kind of like this attic area with like, I don't want to call them vaulted, but when you go into an attic and you can see the structures that hold up the roof. So the inside of the space was still bare, but it was like painted and was done really well. And so you could still see the beams and everything, and the windows on the roof. There was just so much light coming in. I was just like, oh my god, like, this is so awesome. Like, I love the space, and I just want to be here all the time. And so in my head, I was just like, okay, my boo, chill out. And so I'm coming up, and like, we go up. She has a couch upstairs where she can ask me like questions, like intentions for Reiki. And I kind of told her that I'm feeling stagnant, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do next, but I just know like I need to do something. And I told her that I think it might have something to do with mediumship or something that has to do with like spirituality. And so I'm like going on, and I'm like, okay, I know we're on like a short time too, and I'm like, I know that I have a spiritual team. I connect with them. I've done like psychic courses. I've done, all these types of things, and I'm just trying to figure out like what I need to do next. And I'm hoping to like find clarity. I'm hoping to, just see what's next. And I did mention that I was very curious about Reiki, and I have thought about getting certified in Reiki, but I want to see how this experience is first before I make the decision. And so I also talked with her about potentially signing up for one of her classes, but signing myself and my husband up for her classes. But she was sharing with me, like, your husband also has to be ready to do it. And I was like, okay, like, because you can't force somebody to do it. And I was like telling her, I'm like, yeah, I keep telling him like he needs to learn Reiki, or he needs to get a session done. And so she is like really reassuring, really like reminding me that you can't push someone to do the healing if they're not ready to. And so, and I knew all of that. I think I just really wanted him to be with me, or to have that experience with me. But we then get to talking. Oh, and I forgot that when I entered the room and we sat down, I noticed that she had another Japanese doll that was almost life-size, sitting by the couch. And I didn't see her first, but then she kind of like was brought to my attention like almost like unexpectedly, but it had been there the whole time. And so I was just like, oh my god, kind of like spooked out by it, because I was also kind of like, she looks like she could just start walking. And so I was just like, Miku, it's okay, like she's just shy, it's okay. And so I was kind of like gauging everything in her room. It almost if you know that manga or anime series Holic with the Time Witch and the Antique Shop, you kind of get what I'm referring to. So this is what her building was like. This is not where she lives. She actually lives next door, and this building's on her property where she does all her classes and her Reiki sessions. And so that was the vibe that I got. I didn't know this until we took the class. Maybe this is going to be a 2-part episode because the Reiki classes was a whole experience in itself. I didn't find out that her and her husband were antique collectors or sellers until my husband and I did end up taking the class with them. So, I think I'm going to do a part 2. So this is part 1 of the Reiki class, or the Reiki session. And then part 2 would be the Reiki class. So I am like kind of still doing a check-in with the things in the room, and we get to talking, and I'm telling her like what my intentions for this Reiki session are. And after we get done talking, we then proceed to go to she has me sit on the massage bed, and then she does Reiki. Something that I forgot to mention is that Reiki requires like touch. So with Reiki practitioners, what we do is we scan the body, the chakras, and then we go in and heal the chakras, but also connect the life force to the energetic body, and then kind of support and help along that flow so that it's flowing throughout that person's chakra system. So you're kind of like doing repairs. It's just like with plumbing, you're not trying to look for leaks or clogs, or you're looking for leaks and clogs, and then once you find them, you address them and you ensure that that water flows. So life force can be thought of as like that, how it flows throughout your body and your chakra system or your meridian. So it requires touch, so you're touching the head, the neck behind your nape, your heart, your stomach, your hips, your thighs, your knees, and then your ankles. So I'm laying on the massage bed, and she starts doing the Reiki. She actually has me go into meditation, which was really, really cool. I really liked the meditation. It's also something that I ended up incorporating into my Reiki sessions for some folks. And so she has me do a meditation, and it was so awesome. I was able to like tap into meditation right away. And as she starts the Reiki, she does the scan. She then starts doing touch. My fingers are placed on my stomach. They start twitching uncontrollably. They start twitching. And so they start twitching, and I can't stop it. I kind of just let my body like do what it's doing. And so I'm sure she notices this. My eyes are closed. I'm sure she notices this, but then she puts her hand on my heart, and as soon as she puts her hand on my heart, my hands stop twitching. My fingers stop twitching. And so she proceeds to do the scan, and then she then places the she then continues to do the Reiki. I forget at what point I had experienced this, but she puts her hand on my stomach. Oh, it was towards the end. She does the stomach, she does the thighs, she does all the points that I had mentioned, and then as she's switching from my left side to my right side, I have a vision of my female ancestors coming through from the right side. And they're like, hey, we're here. And so the whole time too, I'm like, okay, where are my guides? Because she did mention that as she does Reiki, she also connects with my guides. And my guides include the Ascended Masters I work with, my ancestors, my spiritual guides, my master guides, and I tend to work with star energy too, the star systems too. So I am like, doing a check-in. At that point too, I was like working with a spirit guide that has this like childlike energy. So I'm like, okay, so where's she? Find out she's like hanging out at this one particular area, and I just kind of make a mental note of where I am in the room visually, and I'm like, okay, it's over there. And so then I'm like, okay, they're all here. And then as she moves to my right side, I get the energy of my ancestors coming through, and I was just like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I didn't really ask for them to be here, but they're here. I wasn't trying to have them make more work, and so or work more. And so then that happens, and then as she was finishing up, she places her hand on my stomach. And that's the last place that you would do. That's the last pressure point spot. And so she does that, and I get this vision of in my meditation of a QR code. It's a QR code, right? But it's like the bottom part of it is a tree trunk, and the top part is kind of like pixelated like a QR code. And I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, why is this QR code here? I'm like, it's a tree. Why is this QR code in the shape of a tree in front of me? And if you remember those scenes from like Wreck-It Ralph where they break the internet and it's like kind of pixelated, and you can swipe or you can scan certain things like with your hand or whatever. That's how it felt like I was in this virtual like realm, and this QR code just popped up in front of me. And so I'm still awake. This whole time I'm still awake. But I just have my eyes closed and I'm able to visualize these things. So even if I were to imagine it, it was wild because I'm like, I have never imagined this type of an imagery. And this is like before I watched Wreck-It Ralph, okay? So I like come up to it, and in my hand instinctively I swipe it and I'm like, okay, I absorb it. And so as I did that, I see it pixelate and be absorbed into my body. Oh, and another thing too is like as I was in meditation, the meditation guides you, so it's her voice, she's guiding me to focus my attention on a ball of light, see where it follows, where it goes, and see where it goes and what you do with it. So as I have it in my hand, I have it and I'm like bouncing it up, I'm playing with it, and instinctively my spiritual self, my higher self, my inner self decides to eat it. So I eat it, and I can see the light glowing from inside, going down and illuminating my solar plexus. Illuminating my solar plexus, all my chakras, as it is like being distributed throughout my body. And so I'm like, okay, I'm connected. And the meditation didn't call for me to do this, but that's what I did with it. And so I absorbed it. Which is actually what you're supposed to do in Reiki, is that your ethereal or your energetic self or your spiritual self is supposed to connect with that life force. And so what then happens is that, so that was the one thing about like the life force. So I swiped the QR code, and I'm like, okay, I gotta remember to mention that to her, that this QR code tree revealed itself to us. And I'm thinking, I'm like, a tree, usually when a tree pops up, it's the tree of life. And so the tree of life has very significant meaning in spirituality, in both Asian but also Western spirituality. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna absorb this. And so I do. And we wrap up the Reiki session and she lets me know that we're done. And I sit up and she hands me water, and I'm just she's giving me a second to like find my ground, and I'm drinking water, and then she steps away and she goes, I think too at the beginning before we did the session, I told her that I told her what I did, and at that time I was a tattoo artist. I was still tattooing, but she steps away and she returns with an oracle card, and this particular oracle card has like different archetypes. And she comes up to me and she tells me like, oh, I don't know if cards mean anything to you, but I just thought I'd share this with you. I like to pull out oracle cards before my clients get here to just kind of like figure out what vibe is, or like, what to expect. And I just thought maybe I'd share this with you. She shares it with me, and the card is literally artist. And in my head, I was like, oh my god, this is so cool. I love this. And she's like, kind of just like nonchalant with it. But she kind of was like, yeah, I know. And so we go back and sit down. And she's telling me that I was very receptive to Reiki. And my body responded well. And she was like telling me about my hand situation. And so I think she felt very called to like share this with me, because I know now as a Reiki practitioner that when you are sending intention or energy to a particular point, that the client, their body will do its twitches and spasms and things like that, but it can be consistent. It's almost like, the only thing I can explain is that you send intentions and then all of a sudden the body responds, and that's like an indicator for me as a Reiki practitioner that, oh, okay, she's receiving, or they're receiving this intention or affirmation. And so I like to share that with my clients, just that connection. And then anyway, so she shares with me about the hand twitching situation, and she goes, I saw that your hands were moving a lot, and to me that indicates that there was a lot of energy that wanted to flow through. And so when that happened, I felt called to place my hand on your heart chakra and ask your spirit to, if it was okay, to open up, basically, to ask it to open up, to receive Reiki. And so as she was telling me that, she's like, and when that happened and I placed my hand on your heart, that's what I was doing. I was like, oh my god, that's so... I was wondering what that was. And so she's like, yeah, so you're very receptive to it. It seems that your hands want to do healing. And that she was basically alluding to the fact that, like, Reiki is what I'm supposed to do. And so I was just like, oh yeah, that's very true, because I do feel like at that time I did feel like I have the intention and I have the ability to send it, use my hands for healing, but there's also an imbalance. And so it resonated with me, because then it meant like, okay, that stagnancy is now like cleared. And so she proceeds to say that, and then she had said something about my right ankle and there being a blockage there, that there was a blockage there, and it had to do with healing generational like trauma, something having to do with like the masculine. And I was like, that's very interesting, because the moment that you switched over there, my feminine ancestors came through. So she's like, oh, so for her, the right side is masculine energy and the left side is feminine. However, for me, when I'm doing Reiki to someone, feminine ancestors come through from the right side and masculine ancestors come through from the left side. And so she was saying that, and then I was just like, oh my god, this was such a profound experience. And then the thing about like the guide who has childlike energy, when I opened my eyes and I sat up, I looked up and I realized like the area that I was kind of pinpointing where they would be, there was a panda with a tutu on it. I was like, oh, she was like hanging out with them. And so then I was like, oh, that's really cool. So all of that was confirmed, all of these experiences, it was just like very, very profound. And so I end up doing that. We end up like closing it out, and then I end up going downstairs. I finished paying. I end up deciding to take the class with her. And I put down the deposit, and then I asked her if my husband were to also join another class, how would we go about doing that? And she said that, you can do this. And so, needless to say, he did sign up for it. We did sign up for it. I will talk a little bit about that in the next episode. But to kind of close out this episode, we went downstairs and we're wrapping up the session. And then I end up looking at her merchandise, and I come across this teapot with the tree of life on it. And I was just like, I think I have to buy that. I think I have to buy that because I had that vision of the tree of life. And so I told her, I was like, I want to purchase this tea set. And so she's like, yeah, sure. Let me just go grab the box and the bubble wrap. And so she goes and grabs it. She's going to go and grab it. And I tell her, I'm like, oh, no, I don't think I tell her. I tell her after she comes back. She goes and gets it, she comes back. I was like, yeah, I want to purchase this because in the meditation, I saw the tree of life. And I wanted to purchase this because I think this is a sign. So she goes, oh yeah, I gave you the tree of life. I gave you the tree of life symbol. And I was just like, what? She's like, in my head, I was just like, oh my God, that's so cool. I was like, she goes, yeah, I gave you the tree of life symbol. You'll know what to do with it. And I was like, what? And so she says that. And then I was like, yeah, the most interesting thing though was that I knew it was the tree of life, but it was in the shape of a QR code. And so I was telling her that I swiped it and like I absorbed it. And so she's like, yeah, I gave that to you. You'll know what to do with it. And so she told me that, since I booked the Reiki class, she's like, now that you're connected to Reiki or you've gotten a Reiki session, you should go home and try a little bit of Reiki yourself. Like, you just do it to like a plant or a tree. And so I ended up doing that. Needless to say, the tree did not survive, but I ended up just knowing when to like stop watering it. So sometimes it could just be like, I don't know. I think I just kind of was like, okay, Michael, like, you're giving it Reiki as much as you can, and it's okay. Now it's like making peace with the tree and that it's time to go. So I kind of took it as that. But I also kind of felt like early on in the stages of me learning how to do Reiki that I don't think I'm a good animal Reiki practitioner. Just because I'm used to like connecting with other life forces other than animal life forces. I think I much of my work has to do with kids actually. So I think that's where like I'm strongest is providing healing and support to kids. Mostly kids. But animals also like me. I can't say so for sure. I like animals. I love them. But I'm also one of those where I'm like, I give them their space. There's just some people who can talk to animals. I can't. For example, my husband, he does better at working with animals, whereas I work better with children, and he doesn't really work well with children. And what I mean by that is communication, but also like the patience, but also knowing what they need. So we're kind of like reverse in that way. But we had that conversation, and I was just like, oh my god, I'm really excited to take your Reiki class. Like, I'm gonna try and get my husband enrolled because I think this would be really good for him. And so she still continues to like encourage me to like just not push it on him, and he'll do it when he's ready. But I think at that time I was really pushing with it because I wanted him to also be on this journey with me. But we've since kind of like worked through that, and I know to like give him space now. But yeah, there was that. And then after the Reiki session, I wanted to record a follow-up, but again, I just couldn't hear anything, and I was like still pretty groggy, but I was very refreshed, and I just wanted to absorb like my experience, which inspired me to take a class with her. And that ultimately was the experience that inspired me to learn Reiki. And I use it every day. I use it on me. I use it with just intention. I use it for creating space. I use it for almost anything that just needs oomph into pouring energy into, or needing healing. And so, with that said, I will conclude this episode, and I hope you can tune in for part 2 of my Reiki journey. In the next part, I will talk about the class, as well as a little bit about my experience as a Reiki practitioner, and how I use it, what I can do with it, what you can do with it if it is something that you're interested in, and you're just kind of like waiting for that sign, like I was. Reiki's good for a lot of things. I really like it. It's very gentle for me. It's a very gentle way of doing energy healing, but it's also very impactful and powerful. And so, yeah, that's it. This is it. This is all that I have to share about my personal Reiki experience. And again, I hope you can all tune in for the next one, where I talk about my experience in the Reiki class. So tune in for part 2. And that concludes this episode of The Narrow Path in the Floating Mountains. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can tune in for the next one.